Hi, everybody. This is Kara Fitzgerald at New Frontiers in Functional Medicine. I would not be here month in and month out for the past 6 years without the generous support of our sponsors. And I want to tell you about them. And please check out their websites and check their products out. Biotics research. For over 40 years, the foundation of biotics research has been innovation and quality. Their goals remain unchanged: innovative ideas, carefully researched concepts, and product development with advanced analytical and manufacturing techniques. Biotics nutritional products are of superior quality and effectiveness and available exclusively to healthcare professionals. Visit them at bioticsresearch.com. Integrative therapeutics. Integrative therapeutics is focused on inspiring a better lifestyle through better health. By providing meticulously formulated nutritional supplements and valuable resources, Integrative Therapeutics promises to enrich your patients and embolden your practice. Welcome to your Integrative Therapeutics. Find them at integrativepro.com. And finally, I want to give a shout out to my friends over at Rupa Health. They make lab testing easy, fabulous, doable for both you, the clinician, and you, the person being prescribed the lab, the patient. Consider using Rupa as just a super smart solution to all your laboratory needs. Visit them at rupahealth.com. Hi, everybody. Welcome to New Frontiers in Functional Medicine, where we are interviewing the best minds in functional medicine. And today, of course, is no exception. I couldn't be more excited to have with me here Dr. Charles Serhan out of Harvard. He is, of course, the scientist who discovered specialized pro-resolving lipid mediators, compounds that we're using in clinical practice that we're very, very interested in the world of functional medicine. And I get to pick his brain today. I have pinged him to podcast for a while, so I'm just super excited. And with him, actually, let me give you his background, and then I'll introduce you to Dr. Sulcener over here as well. So Dr. Serhan is the Simon Gelman Professor of Anesthesiology at Harvard. He's also Professor of Oral Medicine and Infection and Immunity at Harvard. He's the Director of the Center for Experimental Therapeutics and Reperfusion Injury at Brigham and Women's Hospital, and past co-director of the Brigham Research Institute. He is currently program director of the program project entitled Resolution Mechanisms in Acute Inflammation, Resolution Pharmacology. He's received a ton of awards. Just too numerous to mention. You can see on the show notes if you really want to know. And he is just a top cited researcher. No great surprise there for all the fabulous publications in really building this field. And then Dr. Sulcener is a MD. She's a general surgery resident, focusing in oncology surgery in Boston, and currently a research fellow at Dr. Serhan's lab in the Center for Experimental Therapeutics and Reperfusion Injury. Their recent commentary entitled Resolution Medicine in Cancer, Infection, Pain, and Inflammation, Are We on Track to Address the Next Pandemic?, was published in Cancer and Metastasis Reviews. Her research focuses on the role of resolution of inflammation and tumor recurrence. I am very honored and excited to have both of you with me today. Welcome to New Frontiers.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, it's fun to be here. Thank you for the kind introduction.
Yeah, well, I've been wanting to talk to you for a long time. So for our audience, and as I mentioned to you before, a lot of these folks are clinicians. We're using SPMs in practice now, so we're going to want to get into that, kind of dig in a little bit deeper, but just define them, what they are, and honestly, how did you come to study them? Like, how did you figure this out? I mean, this is a huge discovery.
Okay. Well, like most things, this is truly serendipitous. I'll give it to you in a 30-second snapshot. It's my personal mission to improve treatments around inflammatory diseases. This is
interesting.
What I think I was meant to do in life. Okay, so I was doing an experiment, asking a very simple, basic, fundamental question about pus in a mouse. Like, where does it go? How does it resolve. Okay. And people thought before that inflammation and the recruitment of leukocytes, because we're really interested in how leukocytes get to the site of action, how they do their job to protect us from microbes. How do they get out? Where do they go? What's the endogenous mechanism? And I felt that there had to be endogenous mechanisms, because each time you got challenged, you get a little pimple, like think on the back of your hand. It goes away. The little pustule will go away. So there had to be some sort of self-limiting side to that. Well, the luck part of it, the serendipity, is that the experiment was done in mice, and the mice were well fed, and I had to backtrack. I got these molecules that had this ability to stop leukocytes from adhering to the vascular endothelium. That was the model that we were using to test different fractions from the pus. And so in backtracking, the precursor, omega-3. So the mice were eating a diet that the veterinarians had already figured out
Wow.
was beneficial to them. Yes, so in our very first paper on this topic, which goes back a ways now, it's kind of buried into the methods, but 30 to 1, 30 times more omega fatty acids present in the chow versus omega-6.
Wow.
And so when I tried to recapitulate that system to figure out how do human cells make, so we used hypoxia chamber with vascular endothelial cells, co-incubated with neutrophils, and so that's how the E series resolvents were born, and that's how the D series resolvents were born. And then systematically we do the structural elucidation and look for their bioactions, because we have in vivo models. And then to confirm all that, total organic synthesis. And then I was really lucky again to have a program project team, which is a project from NIH where it's multiple groups working together. And I could lead the mission there. And then I got a P50 Center grant from NIH on resolution of oral inflammation, and was able to start working with the periodontists and demonstrate in animal models all the way up now to humans that pro-resolving mediators can stimulate the resolution endogenous mechanisms in humans to resolve inflammation. And we think this is very important. And my colleague, Tom Van Dyke, periodontist, carried out the clinical trial. I just made the mouth rinse, carrying the pro-resolving mediator. And it's impressive. And I hope it goes forward. Why? Because in the oral cavity, if you have a little inflammation, it begins to open the barrier. This is a mucosal barrier. And then we get more bacteria circulating. We're challenging the innate immune system. And those barriers, as you know, are very important. The blood-brain barrier, the oral barrier, and that seems to be one of the functions of the SPMs, to tighten up the barriers.
Oh, isn't that amazing? Very, very interesting. The blood-brain barrier, the oral barrier, the gastrointestinal, like what about the lung barrier, like all of them?
Yes, all of them. And we've
Wow.
done the lung with the new chief of pulmonary here, Dr. Levy, and he studied with me early on, and we've studied, the edema. And starting with very simple models like the mouse ear, just looking at leak, we could visually see that if we add the SPMs topically, we wouldn't get leak that we could measure by fluorescence or trypan blue. This little mouse ears turn blue, very easy signal. But the important part of the SPMs that you have and you're available to came again by luck. Okay,
Yeah, because
so
we have like a precursor SPM, like a
that's right.
parent
Mhm.
SPM, right?
So those precursors are the products that are made by the vascular endothelium. And when in humans, and when human leukocytes come by, primarily the neutrophils, they pick them up and they convert them to the very potent SPMs. So I just happened to have a colleague who worked in fish. And when we came up, he's a fish hematopathologist. So when this came up, I sent the people in my lab, said, oh, we better go study the anchovies. If this is where omega-3s are isolated from for commercial purposes. And we found that in the anchovies, yeah, they have the 17 HDHA, 18 EAP. And then I turned to my friend and we looked in the trout and we looked in the trout brain, and the trout head kidney gland is really the hematopoietic organ of fish. And there are the more potent SPMs are produced, like resolved D5, resolved D1. And what happens, again, just by luck, you can hear that I'm from the molecular side of the universe. And this was dark matter. This didn't exist before.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
I was very excited about it, and my colleagues were excited. So we're gonna make a startup, because this is, as you know, most of the non-steroidals and current treatments, the pharmacopoeia for treating inflammation, all antagonists and inhibitors,
Yes.
which have some unwanted side effects. So it's like, oh, this is a new way. We're
Significantly.
going to stimulate resolution. We're going to go out and do it. We're going to
Yeah.
knock them dead. Well, it was a lesson for me
Mhm.
that even with positive 263, I think, patients it was, treated with a resolving E1 analog eye drop,
Mm-hmm.
positive results. The business guys couldn't get it together to make it happen, to make everybody happy. And I was only caring about the science and improving people, so it was a lesson to me. However, that molecule, resolving E1, is advancing from the work from Thetis. Thetis emphasizes that they make resolvins druggable, and they are doing that in
Okay.
both for IBD. They'll be doing a clinical trial in IBD and in cancer as well. So we wish them luck and hope that it happens, because our other mission, which is the overarching mission, and I know that Megan can agree with this, our mission is to save as many people as possible, to help as many people as possible. And so, since the traditional drug route took so long, the next good luck step for me was to run into people who did CO2 purification from marine oils. And that was a group in Spain. And we isolated a fraction with them that was very rich in 17 HDHA and 17 heat. So you're going a little bit further down the pathway. It's about 100 times more potent than just taking DHA or EPA itself. But 17
Wow.
is very potent in reducing pain, and 18 is on its own. Subsequent studies by other investigators, and 18, aside from just being a precursor, also has cardiovascular beneficial effects. Nice papers from groups in Japan.
Awesome.
So I like the SPMs because if you have a little bit of inflammation going on, I want to emphasize this point because this is really key. And we all have a little bit because acute inflammation is protective. So we're
Well, the
getting this.
aging journey kicks in inflammation. I mean, it's part of the deterioration as well. So that we don't want.
Well, you're right, but when you have a little bit going on, I'll give you another point about the aging.
Okay.
The leukocytes that are around will convert the SPM precursors to the local molecule that's bioactive, and it's doing its thing right on site. And that's why I like it.
Amazing.
Yeah. So you're right about the aging. You get more debris, and you have to clear that debris out, an aging organ, right? But some of the very cool research now is all directed towards how SPMs are regulating stem cells.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Muscle stem
Amazing.
cells.
Really?
It's nice results.
Well, we'll link to those. We'll link to those studies. My team will harvest them. That's awesome. We'll put them on the show notes, folks.
Yeah, nice.
That's
There's a
very
wonderful
cool.
group in Canada that has discovered that one of our most favorite resolvents, resolvent D2, because it's so potent, stimulates muscle stem cell.
Amazing.
And that could be very useful in Duchenne's, muscular dystrophy, and the neurodegenerative diseases are all benefiting from, and even the psychiatrists, they say, oh, brain on fire, right? And that leads to depression. Doing nice studies with EPA and DHA. Our chief here at Mass General Brigham, Maurizio Fava, published on EPA reducing depression and leading to a dose-dependent increase in E-series resolvents.
Oh, is that right? Nice.
Gotta love it. Gotta love it.
It's incredible.
Moving out in all directions.
Thank God for veterinary designed, mouse chow. Jeez Louise. I mean, just because that happened to be 30-1, you discovered
Yankee schools are way ahead of us because they've been watching how do we optimize the herd, not only for their health, but for the economics of it as well. So yes, we would love it.
That's right. It's incredible. It's incredible. I mean, this is Nobel material. It's just exquisitely important.
Well, I'm going to Stockholm next week for a special symposium, and I have to say, but my mentor, one of my mentors, was a Nobel laureate, and I did get a chance to go as a kid, and that's like a fairy tale. But Samuelson, he received his Nobel for the prostaglandin structural elucidation, and that's how I learned that work. And my other mentor, I got to give a plug to, is Jerry Weissman, and he was a guru at NYU of rheumatology and inflammation. So we
fabulous. It's brilliant. It's just brilliant. I mean, it's just so appreciative. So I want to just sketch a little bit of background, and then I just want to jump over to you, Megan, and just talk about your extraordinary work, swimming in this pond for the last decade, and your work in cancer. So for folks, the specialized for resolving lipid mediators, the SPMs, are primarily derived from EPA and DHA, our classic omega-3s, the reason that we're all taking fish oil. I know that arachidonic acid produces lipoxin, which kicks these guys on. So we want a little background.
You got it.
But we're dwarfed by humans are dwarfed with arachidonic acid. So we don't need to be supplementing with this. We need to be bumping up our EPA and DHA. And then these resolvents I'm sorry, I'm just in the habit of using that colloquialism. These SPMs, these SPMs are, I mean, how many have you characterized? Are there hundreds, would you say? Or like,
well, it's still the tip of the iceberg, because even though we found 3 different families of molecules, these are the ones that come from lipids. But then we learned that there are gases that are involved in resolution and peptides, and they all interact. Like some resolvents turn on local heme 1 oxygenase, makes a little local carbon monoxide resolves inflammation. It's a very complex system. And this
Incredible.
is just the beginning.
But this, we have a global sort of, man-made, deficiency of these omega-3s. And so we
Yeah.
see, just incredible inflammation that's not being resolved. You famously said chronic inflammation is the failure of resolution, and all of us are operating with a deficit of these. So there's many of them. It's the tip of the iceberg, and they're tissue specific. So there's the neuroprotectants, there's the resolvents, behaving in different ways in different tissue, and they're all coming from omega, EPA and DHA. And so we want to make sure we have enough in our red blood cells, which we can readily measure.
Cara, you make me so happy to hear how much you know. That makes me feel like it's been worthwhile.
You're appreciated in the functional medicine world. We get it. We get how important this is. So one of my questions to you, and then I'm envious that you got to spend a decade studying this, Megan. But I'm also super appreciative of the fact that you're focusing on cancer, because everything is implicated. Inflammation is everywhere. But we know that some of us, in fact, painfully, those of us who have active inflammation, aggressive inflammation happening, may not convert our EPA and DHA, and there's some sort of disruption in the mechanism that's not allowing the production of the resolvins to happen. And so there are two things in my mind. A, we obviously have to be using resolvins then. We can use them acutely. I do all the time in practice, but I also think there's a place for just taking them background along with EPA and DHA while you're getting to the bottom of the inflammation issue, getting the patient back to balance. That's what I think about in my general plans, really, for almost any kind of condition. So everything's associated with inflammation. But my question is, what's the disruption that doesn't allow people, that inhibits the production of resolvins? And then I want to talk about, what you're seeing in your
Actually,
in your
that's
research.
at several levels that we can identify. One is, as you point out, where your nutrition is absent of the omega-3. The other is a genetic predisposition of dysfunctional receptors that are the GPCR cell surface receptors that recognize the resolvins. And the third is the loss of specific enzymes that are involved in the biosynthesis. And that's what we can recognize now that would lead to failed resolution and going on to, let's say, organ fibrosis.
Wow.
But what I can tell you that we are working on right now, there's a secret because the project we haven't published on yet. But I'll tell you that we're really looking at the impact of environmental agents on resolution now, and they're all disruptors. So
no surprise.
Need to identify those, and so this you'll see new things coming from us on that note, hopefully within the next calendar year.
Okay, that would be fabulous. Can you mention any of the key disruptors? Can you do that yet?
Not yet, but you can. But we're studying things that are very prevalent in the environment, and I've been down to NIEHS, the National Institute of Environmental and Health Sciences, and they're excited about the work and resolution. And I'm hoping that we're working with first class nanoparticle groups to help us peel this very complex onion apart, because it really gets also to the environment. But let me let
Hey there, listeners. It's your host, Dr. Kara Fitzgerald. I have a question for you. How much time do you spend ordering functional lab tests for your patients? I bet it's a lot. Ordering from multiple lab companies for hundreds of patients can quickly turn into hours of admin time. But there's a new way to order lab tests I'm excited to share with you. Rupa Health is a tool that lets you order from over 30 specialty labs in a single portal. You can order all the tests you normally do from companies like Dutch, Vibrant, Genova, and Great Plains, and so many more. Imagine you're ordering a hormone panel for a patient that includes tests from 3 different labs. You have to log onto 3 different websites, place separate orders, come back weeks later to check on tracking numbers, download results, et cetera, et cetera. Rupa eliminates all of that by having all ordering, tracking, results in a single place, and they also handle invoicing, tracking shipments, automated follow-ups, personalized instructions for completing tests, and much more. The best part about Rupa is that it is free for you. Go to rupahealth.com, that's RUPA health.com, and join a live demo or sign up to see how it works. Now let's get back to today's show.
Megan,
Yeah,
tell
tell
about
me.
her fantastic.
Actually, tell me your back. So tell me how you got interested, and now you're focusing in cancer and inflammation resolution using SPMs. Yeah, give me your story.
Yeah, I was a college student and I was interested in biology. I was interested in cancer biology, and a close collaborator of Dr. Serhan's, Deepak Panagrahi, had come and presented in our class about his kind of preliminary data actually with Dr. Serhan. He was talking about using SPMs as an adjuvant therapy in addition to chemotherapy and surgery in mouse models. And his data that he had presented just my class was fantastic. It was absolutely amazing. And I thought, wow, maybe this is really what I want to do after school. So I ended up being a research assistant in his lab, and our kind of main project was looking just at that, understanding why is it that tumors come back after patients get chemotherapy or surgery. So understanding those mechanisms, which of course, one of the main drivers was inflammation, kind of secondary to chemotherapy or surgery. And then using the SPMs as an adjuvant therapy, which was a really exciting project to work on, especially as someone just out of college. I actually very vividly remember, I'm sure Dr. Serhan does not remember this, but I remember I had worked in the lab for about a year, and we'd come to his lab meeting, which at the time was like very big, very, formal and academic. And I was presenting my data, which I'm sure for nobody else there, they're postdocs, really impressive backgrounds, were really listening. But I remember I gave the presentation and I thought afterwards, wow, if I can present in front of Dr. Serhan, I can present in front of everyone. And even now, now I have presentations, I still actually think back to that moment. But yeah, it was really great. So we had, I worked in the lab for a couple of years. I went to medical school and I did some dedicated research time where I actually came back to kind of finish up our studies. And then now I'm currently a general surgery resident at Brigham and Women's Hospital.
Well, in between, there was a big publication with US First Author.
Yes, there was. Yes, there was a really incredible opportunity to work on that project, and certainly has kind of set the foundation for how I now view actually my current surgical training and how I see diseases, I think, a little bit through a different lens than we are more traditionally thought of or taught in our textbooks. This kind of field of resolution inflammation is so pertinent, particularly for surgical outcomes. I mean, it's really, if I think of like the main things we're thinking about all the time about patients coming back after surgery, it is all related to the resolution of inflammation and typically how it's failed. And now I'm back in the lab. And again, very grateful and honored and surrounded by incredibly smart people in the Serhan lab, looking to translate our previous work into patient data. So
awesome. Can you, so I mean, I know that anyone listening to this, again, there's a lot of clinicians here, are wanting to translate it right now.
Yeah.
What can we do? And I think in functional medicine, in this integrative model, we're working with diet and lifestyle and sleep and stress, and we're making sure people's nutrients are an adequate supply. And we're everybody starts with fish oil, really, virtually all of us, unless there would be an allergy or something impeding it. A human has never presented to my practice not in need of fish oil and vitamin D, probably. So we're doing all of that good that good foundational work. But would you suggest certainly in your cancer patients, but I'm curious, are SPMs indicated for all of us? Since we can get pretty good quality product now of those potent precursors, are they really indicated for all of us?
It's a great question. I think, yes, I can certainly say from our previous studies in our animal models, I would say we used SPMs both as an adjuvant therapy and actually also as a pre-treatment. And in both cases, they did prevent tumor recurrence in our mouse models. And it was like pretty incredible. I mean,
Wow.
in the space now, there is really limited. I mean, our therapies for treating tumor recurrence, particularly solid tumors, are
Yeah.
still limited to the main kind of touch points, which are radiation, chemotherapy, and surgery. Of course, there's
Yeah.
been like incredible advances made, particularly in immunotherapy and targeted therapy, but really the cornerstones are still the same that they were 50 years ago.
Yes.
And so our
And
work on,
transplants,
yeah,
we're going to do something.
yes,
But I just have to jump in and say one thing, because this is, I think, really important for every day. The way we want to think about this, well, the way I think about it, after having spent many sleepless nights thinking about it,
Yeah.
is that, and I learned this from the nutritionists, people who have studied nutrition for a lifetime, like Artemis Simonopoulos, the woman who really validated and brought us the
Yeah.
Mediterranean diet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
I think of it as resilience, right? The way that our body pushes back of that little challenge every day. So if you get this little challenge and you have no resilience, no
Mhm.
biochemical resilience to make resolvins locally and clear up
Mhm.
that little pimple, repeated challenge is going to bring us to the disease states that we're at. That's why I've become so
Right.
interested in the environmental impact. And
Yeah.
so in that you can hear that I think as this is a part of healthy nutrition.
Yes.
We need to
Mhm.
do this. We need to do it for kids.
Yes.
Period. And I would like to see those studies as quick as we can.
There's a scientist who I follow out of University of Kentucky, Bernard Hennig, who his work is around looking at the influence of nutrients on modulating the impact of toxins. So specifically, he's looked at PCBs and omega-3s, and
Mm.
you can mitigate the damage from PCBs with omega-3s, which I think is, hopeful and important.
Mhm.
And he was specifically looking at the eicosanoid cascade, but
Yes, but you evaluate, and there's a nice paper from the CDC West Virginia group that came to visit us here just before the COVID and shutdown, where they show the resolvins helping to clear, the impact of nanoparticles on amplifying inflammation.
awesome. We can't measure. Well, you just gave me the recommendation, the fact that we can go through Wayne State, their lipidomics panel, and it's not a horrible price point. We'll put a link in that in the show notes, folks, for those of you who want to start looking at resolvins in some of your patients. I think it's absolutely indicated for some of us. I mean, if we're making adequate resolvins, no need to supplement. In fact,
you're absolutely right. I wish that we could do like a resolvin dipstick like you do for urine, but I think that will come.
Yeah.
People like Bill Harris
Yes.
really advanced the field a great deal with his simple blood.
Yeah, the omega-3 index, easy peasy.
And really qualify that so well. The LCMS-MS based quantitation is moving very quickly to the clinical sort of utility, but it's not as turnkey. It's not as easy as people. It takes an expertise to be able to read it. But my hope is that in the future, cardiologists will be able to look at a LCMS tracing, functional medicine, clinician, look at the tracing and say, oh yeah, like reading it like an EKG, you can tell what a person needs. But I do want to make one molecular point to you, is that I don't no longer consider fish oils to be equivalent to EPA and DHA, because there's a lot, and if the commercial material that's available. There's a lot of other things present, and I've done analysis in my lab, and I've found
Mm-hmm.
stuff off the shelf. I've fish steroids in it and all kinds of
Wow.
stuff. So as we better at purifying at commercial scale, EPA and DHA, that's what
That's
we
where it
want to
is.
go for.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Very good to know. That's great. Yes. Okay. Perfect. Yeah. Yeah. Quality is definitely an issue.
And
And
you
I
know who
think,
can do that really well?
Mhm.
And this is Save the Planet, is the microalgae. So you want to look for
Oh,
companies
interesting.
in the future that are ramping up the microalgae, and
microalgae.
there are, and
Mhm.
you'll see some really cool stuff coming.
So we definitely need to avoid OTC products, go for the high quality ones, and microalgae. That's a hot tip. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, the
Um,
microalgae DHA, right, Dr. Serhan, that you can get over. There's one particular one over the counter that's very good.
Oh, really? What is it? Can you say? You can say in my podcast if you're okay with it. I'm super curious. Or tell me later when I hit pause. I'm gonna get bugged about it.
No, we're big lovers of metagenics. That's not a problem.
Yeah.
And because we started that with the Cyotech group, who was their supplier, and
Mhm.
the group in Spain.
Yeah.
And there are many copycats. I don't care about that. All we care about is that it's getting into the mouths of people and hopefully helping people. And where I see the biggest impact of that is in pain.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Have a quantifiable reduction in pain. And
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm
You
happy
know, I
about it.
used it. I had a patient with uveitis, and she would have a very predictable prodrome. It felt like she had dust in her eyes, like she
Yes,
dusted the house. She had
Mhm.
this
yes,
predictable prodrome. And I would say, I just told her they're safe. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that they're by and large, we could go pretty aggressively as we could with fish oil. So I would have her
sure.
just take a couple, every 2 hours for maybe the first day of the prodrome, and we would be able to nip that in the bud. I mean, she was able to taper
Wow,
off her steroids, but we didn't mess around. I had her go in there and really use
Good.
them.
No,
that's
you're on the
fantastic.
right track. There are very nice studies from groups in Italy on uveitis,
Mhm.
and they have used the synthetic resolvents. They're shown to be very effective.
Drops, right? Drops.
Yes,
Yeah.
and there's new work on macular degeneration, shows how important the E series resolvents are, again from Italy.
Yeah.
So yes, you can be very aggressive in the dosing because we can tolerate milligrams to grams when we eat, salmon and so forth.
Yeah.
And yes, we have not seen any, what can I say, unwanted side effects in any of the experimental models, going all the way up to mini pig.
Mhm.
That's just so terrific. I mean, I've used it in periodontal disease as well, and it will be fabulous when we have access to local and the drops, and
Mhm.
I heard you mention topical. That got my, because all we have right now
Mhm.
are the oral precursor molecules, and I really look forward to having access to some of these others. How are you thinking, Megan, about dosing it for cancer recurrence or even prevention?
That's a great question. I don't have a good answer for you on kind of what we're thinking about dosing, at least in humans. What we're kind of looking at is similar to what you had alluded to, is almost like a deficiency. And I actually think, of course, Dr. Serhan's characterization of having a resilience is a
Yes.
really incredible way to start thinking about it, because we know in so many other patient studies that there are patients for certain reasons already have baseline higher levels of SPMs and those that don't, and it's kind of unclear as to exactly who those patients are.
Is it not like I'm sure you're looking at EPA and DHA and it's not just the quantity of EPA and DHA that they've got in their lipid membrane. It's more than that. The folks who
Yeah,
are making it.
yeah, it's definitely certainly also a downstream effect as well. So, but I think the way I'm starting to think about it more as I'm kind of going along in our translational studies and seeing, of course, all the really great work by people all over the world is that it falls to me under the same umbrella as immunonutrition, which of course is a really hot topic, particularly when we're thinking about surgical patients. So that's kind of how I've started to think about it. I think for me, it's like a next step in terms of what we want to look at and really doing clinical studies. There was a great group, I believe, out of Japan that actually did this study. They gave patients SPMs up front prior to surgery. They underwent a major abdominal surgery. I believe it was a hepatobiliary surgery, and then measured levels of SPMs in subsequent post-operative days.
Right.
Yeah. And it was amazing. The patients who had higher levels of SPMs each subsequent post-operative day did better than their counterparts who had lower SPM levels. And again, they had been supplemented preoperatively. So it was a really great, and I thought exciting study, particularly in surgical patients.
Yeah, terrific. And we've put to bed, I think, in some of these larger clinical trials using omega-3s that,
Right.
there's any bleed risk.
You're absolutely right. I mean, Phil Caldor did an excellent job there because he provided evidence to dispel that old data that,
Yeah.
you're going to get bleeding from blocking platelet activation and thromboxane production. And so many surgeons still believe that and ask their
Yes, they
patients
do.
to be prior to surgery, don't take omegas. But that's one of Megan's mission, is to teach them that that's not at all the case.
And maybe
Yes,
they'll let
it is.
SPMs sneak in because they don't know what they are. Like maybe they'll just, because
the surgeons who have been publishing on SPMs, they know what they are. There's some really nice papers from academic surgeons, and Megan is the future. She's a surgeon scientist. When she gets out there, it's going to change.
I mean, in real time still, when you're co-managing with a surgeon or a cardiologist, there's anxiety there and they want them to stop. But what you're saying, Megan, is that we're actually harming the healing process by
No, it's
keeping
absolutely the opposite. We have shown very nicely, and now many other groups that the resolvins stimulate tissue regeneration. They expedite wound healing. Even topically, and surgical pain. It's time to clear away those cobwebs and get up with it. Okay, so there are critics, but that's because they don't want to turn the page to the new chapter. What can I say? And there's already today, there's 1,000, and I'm very proud of this, 1,632 papers in PubMed.gov on all the fantastic things that resolvins and SPMs do in animal models from groups all around the world, including 38 studies demonstrating by other groups taking supplementation and increasing peripheral blood SPMs. And really nice papers from Switzerland where with nice clinical chemistry, and it's going to happen.
It's very exciting. I know. I would say that it's like shooting fish in a barrel, no pun intended, because it's true. You can go on PubMed for whatever condition you're interested in and generally find something related to SPMs, like COVID. You can look at COVID, that's been studied. You can look at even Lyme associated arthritis in an animal model.
I just heard Charlie Brown give the talk on that.
Yeah, some pretty.
The paper just came out. Wow, I'm impressed.
This is a topic. It's so fundamentally
the
important.
Resolution of Lyme arthritis. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And endometriosis comes to mind just as I was talking to you offline. The cases that we've done in my clinic practice where we really paid attention closely.
Endometriosis is another potential clinical indication. You're right. And so is vulvodynia and the pain in vulvodynia. And there are groups working towards trying to make therapeutics there.
So when are we going to? Thank God we've got. We know that we can access good quality SPMs. We or at least the precursors. But when in the drug development pipeline, like when do you think some of these are going to launch?
that in my group and with my colleagues, we've made those those molecules.
Yeah.
And the pushback for us has been for the pushback is really been on the cost of goods. This was an education for me. It costs so much to make because it's so complicated, the synthetic routes, but groups have already chopped that down. And today, if we were to go at it, people like Professor Spur in New Jersey, the people in Thetis, you know, Frank, who's one of the founders there, was a medicinal chemist at Pfizer for his lifetime. He got onto the problem and he made it happen. He made resolvins really druggable by shortening those synthetic routes. So now we just got to get the money to link up with in the periodontal disease.
Yeah.
You know, that was, as I said, safe and effective in the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 clinical trials on, but it's still very hard for Dr. Van Dyke to raise the money to get to the next level because big clinical trials cost a lot of money, and the big pharma likes to hold tight on the battleships that they have rolling right now. This is a 180-degree turn.
Yeah, it is. It's revolutionary. It's going to happen. Its time has to come. But we'll certainly.
In France, when I was in France, there were groups there using the apoptotic cell approach and the macrophage secretome. So in the macrophage secretome, they're throwing out not just the resolvins, but the anti-inflammatory cytokines and other factors that we don't know about yet.
Yeah.
And amazing, they have approval to use that in patients. You know, but we, you know, that type of cell-based therapy in the States, it would, you know, wouldn't happen. So it'll happen. It's just taking more than one scientific lifetime.
What about the aspirin potentiated? I mean, do you recommend a baby aspirin for that reason? Like in general, for the aspirin potentiated?
Low dose aspirin
resolvins?
for the
Yeah, the low dose.
triggered. Yeah, so we found some years ago that low dose aspirin acetylated one of the enzymes that changes the chirality and makes the resolvins longer acting. And yes, I think that if you can get a good high or pure source of EPA and DHA, and your doc says it's okay to take a baby 81 milligram dose every other day, if that's indicated for you, then sure, why not? To crank up your aspirin, because they're longer acting, and that makes them more potent. So they're longer acting, because like most potent signals, even in the brain, once they communicate with their neighboring cell, they have to get inactivated. And that's what happens to the resolvins. They get locally inactivated so that we're not in an off mode, that we're in the on mode for the next challenge. But the aspirin trigger ones, they stay around longer.
That's very interesting. Yeah. I mean, that to me strikes me as the likely mechanism of action of the low dose aspirin benefit.
That's a 360 is what people prescribe for RA, and usually 2 aspirins, you know, like 180, but in the States, low dose is like 81. But
I just want to be clear, since I have you here, non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, ibuprofen, like naproxen, et cetera, are you going to actually inhibit inflammation resolution?
Well, you certainly lower the amplitude of the acute inflammatory response. That's why if you take the swelling, you feel better, you block prostaglandins, but those prostaglandins are needed to turn on the resolution phase. And those non-steroidals have been shown to be disruptors of resolution in animal models and lead you into fibrosis.
Here is big news. Great Plains Laboratory is now Mosaic Diagnostics. Mosaic Diagnostics is where functional medicine practitioners turn to reveal the complete picture of their patients' underlying illnesses through evidence-based diagnostic testing. Get to know Mosaic Diagnostics by visiting mosaicgiveaway.com. Licensed practitioners can enter to win Mosaic's Business Booster giveaway. It's $875 worth of test discounts, supplements, free educational passes, and a 1-hour massage for your self-care. Visit mosaicgiveaway.com for your chance to win.
Now, that's where we really lock horns with some of our pharmacology friends, because, and everybody wants to take their drug of choice. I don't want to mention product names, but you can imagine what we're talking about. I mean, sometimes I get bruised,
And it's not to say, don't take an acute couple of ibuprofens, but it's I would imagine it's the chronic use.
That's right. It's the prolonged use. And okay, so I have to say this from where I live, okay, from my heart. I have 2 children that are active military. They take bruises all the time.
Yeah.
No, don't take that non-steroidal. Sports, I think the kids go out sometimes ahead of time thinking if they load up on non-steroidals, they're not going to get banged up so much. No, are you kidding? You actually make it worse. Then there was a guy named Markworth went after it and did a nice study with strenuous exercise in, I think it was 60 adults in New Zealand. He published, James Markworth, that's right. He published this in Physiology Journal, showed that non-steroidals uncoupled what's called lipid-mediated class switching and use, and really laid it up.
They just shut it down.
Now he's moved to the US and he's got a faculty position at Purdue. And he's putting out some very nice work on how resolvents are regulating muscle tone and
Fascinating. So cool. So really you're saying if you can avoid the ibuprofen even acutely, do it. I mean, you could, we've prescribed resolvents.
You need to have it, there's no question about it,
but just limit it.
Enormous pain. So acutely fine, but prolonged, there are people who have RA that want to, they're in pain every day, rheumatoid arthritis, and they want to take non-steroidals every day for the pain. And in some cases, some of those do really effectively reduce pain. But in the long run, you're throwing a risk against cardiovascular disease and the resolvents. And the resolvents themselves are very potent. Our pain colleagues have shown their Largoid is more potent than morphine. So wouldn't you want to have a resolvent?
That's awesome. That is really awesome. There's a study that I cite showing that fish oil, this was fish oil, if I'll have to get your whole resolvent library, but was effective as Humira for pain relief in RA, but you needed to be taking an adequate dose for a long enough duration.
That's absolutely right. Yes. And there are nice studies in animal models of RA and from Canada in OA, osteoarthritis with resolvents. And, it's the question of trying to get pharma to put up the dollars to help do the human trials. And then it's a head-to-head, and then the business guys go, what's in it for us? A head-to-head. Okay, if you lose, it's incredibly, we wish the whole world, revolved around scientific evidence and molecular mechanisms and increasing wellness through improved nutrition. It makes sense for a bacteria to be in a good environment. of nutritious environment, right? That's a simple experiment. They gave a Nobel Prize to that for Jacobi Monod, I think a long time ago. So
Yeah.
is it so hard for us to think that we have to be well nourished? And
Yeah.
probably what we don't understand is that there are different compartments in the human body that require different types of nutrients constantly.
Yeah.
So I don't know. If you ask me, do I need a circulating level of resolvin D2? I don't know. I want to know. It's hard for us to get the answer, but I would think based on my own blood, yeah, maybe yes.
Well, and going back to, you were talking about Artemis. I always feel like
Simonopoulos.
Simonopoulos' work.
She's a pediatrician who was at NIH her entire career, and she understands the genetics really well.
Well, I mean, I think it was her. She was certainly one of the people who talked about us evolving with a 25-to-1, up to a 25-to-1 omega-3 to omega-6 ratio,
You're right.
which is like your mouse chow, right? And if we were still consuming anywhere in that neighborhood, we'd be bathed in resolvins all the time.
That's
like all
true.
of our tissues, right? So
Yeah.
we probably evolved to have them in a pretty ample supply.
You're absolutely right. She has a table that I showed from one of her publications, where she has the ratios of calculated from early evolution, when we have evolved from the marine and living close to the shore, and then continually going down, and how that's different in different parts of the world. And I guess that was part of the argument about the Mediterranean diet,
Yeah, its benefit. I've got two more questions. I want to ask you about neurodegenerative conditions and resolvins. Oh, and I have a little story that I want to share, a paper that I want to share. And then Megan, I want to circle back to you for our future, like where we're going with this, and it's like some of the science that you're excited about. One of the papers that I present when I talk about EPA and DHA and resolvins and so forth there's some interesting cases. They're case reports in the literature, like severe traumatic brain injury, with massive amounts of EPA and DHA given. And so I expect what I say is they're probably converting to neuroprotectins, and that's what's exerting the influence. So that's one. I want to hear your thoughts on that. But then I'm just curious about using resolvins and neurodegenerative conditions, dementia, Alzheimer, Parkinson, etc.
So you hit two things I really love. So I got an invitation to Kentucky, and there's a traumatic brain institute there, and they have published beautiful work showing in animal models repetitive injury, TBI, traumatic brain injury from repetitive injury, that resolvin D1, resolvin E1 are all protective. And I think that that's really important, and it puts us right into our those that help our first responders and our defenders of our nation, our military. We want them to have nutritional armor. Okay, think about it.
Yeah.
And so, yes, massive, the studies, I've seen those, and yes, the brain produces resolvins, no question about that. They produce NPD1. And in Alzheimer's disease, I worked with the group of neuroscientists at the Karolinska Institute some years ago. And we found that resolvin stimulated the clearance of A-beta peptide.
Oh, fascinating. Wow.
So Marianne Schultzberg has continued that line of research. We put this idea that it was failed resolution in it, but then they published something really fantastic, which is in that Alzheimer's mouse, they lose memory, right? Because they have there's plaque and disruption of their neural circuits. They gave a nasal dose. This is which was most
Oh, interesting.
a
Yeah.
nasal
Mhm.
dose of resolvins, and the mice got their memory back. I can't believe it.
Extraordinary.
It's just
Extraordinary.
it's so cool. Yeah, so Marianne Schultzberg's paper you need to take a look at. And there is a company that got started from one of the early ResolveX guys that focused solely on neurodegenerative diseases. And I do think there is an opportunity there because you know that just the drainage system of the brain was only discovered, the lymphatic
Yeah,
system, a
right.
few years ago.
I know.
Can you believe that?
I know, it's amazing.
And now, you know, the neuroscientists say, oh yeah, you need to sleep so that you can flush what you've accumulated during the day. Okay, good. Well, that's what the resolvins do in resolving
awesome.
inflammation. Okay. And there's very nice papers again from Japan. Why Japan? Japan, they have a very high omega baseline in their diet.
Yeah,
They're really
right.
interested in this. They have very good neuropharmacology. They have presented data suggesting that the resolvins, E series and D series, are endogenous neurotransmitters. They're endogenous antidepressants.
Oh, incredible. Very interesting. So this could be the mechanism of why we've seen fish oil effective.
Absolutely. Don't you feel, you know, down when you feel lousy? It's part of
Yeah.
our IL-1
Yeah, it's part of, sure.
PGE2 circuit.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's general malaise. We're supposed to do that so that we don't exert ourselves and at a time when our body needs energy supposedly to heal, right? It's a divert.
Yeah.
At least that's what I was taught. You know, but that's all you can hear. I'm old school.
You know, and we know that you know, DHA and EPA both cross the blood-brain barrier in our you know, we're packed with DHA. I do you know, do resolvins cross the blood-brain barrier as well?
Well, they heal the blood-brain barrier.
Yeah, that's what you
I
said.
do know that, and they regulate the TNF. There's this. We've done that in my line. We've published on that. We've published on Parkinson's, but I don't know. But they're present in cerebral spinal.
Yeah,
I was just
they
gonna
are.
say that.
So are we producing them locally? I mean, I'm sure we are, but maybe they're also crossing.
We did publish with some neuroscientists that came to work with us from the Netherlands that the choroid cells that make cerebral spinal fluid make SPMs. So, and I've seen other groups publish on cerebral spinal fluid. So I would tend to believe it. That is part of the normal. But the coolest thing that I've seen, talk about measurements. Okay. You want the future?
Yeah.
Okay. But we need the rest of the evidence. So a group from France and Italy just published that you could measure bioactive lipids in saliva, and that the saliva can dictate cardiovascular events. I was like, wow. So wouldn't that be better than drawing blood on your patients or getting your fingers thick? So that's the, you know, just for your audience, just to differentiate from sputum. Sputum is different. Saliva, this is a secretory gland, right? And it doesn't take much. You can milk it. I learned this from the oral medicine people. And there's some very nice papers by a woman named Olga Vega, who's been studying resolvins on the salivary gland. So the group is Terry Duran's group in France, Montpellier, working together with an Italian group. Please take a look at the paper. It's the first of its kind.
That's amazing. And again, folks, we'll build as big a library on the show notes as we can. As you can see, there's many papers. What are your thoughts, Megan, for the future and, you know, what you're interested in going where and what you see?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it's a really exciting time to be in the field of resolution of inflammation. I mean, it is truly so applicable to the diseases we see every day coming into the emergency department. And of course, I can speak particularly to the surgical patients. I think where I see the future going is one, having more of the medical community and particularly the surgical community really understanding the resolution of inflammation. I think we take a stance a lot of the time of just addressing the sequelae of inflammation or kind of anticipating, post-operative outcomes that are related to inflammation. But if we start to take more proactive stance thinking about it, I really think in the field of immunonutrition, it's going to be a big place where resolvins and SPMs can really, participate in how we're thinking about improving post-operative outcomes, surgical patient outcomes. And there's certainly, there's so much to do. I every day in the lab, I'm thinking of other applications that it's just really incredible. So that's kind of where I'm thinking. It really is so broad and wide.
In the ICU, in the critical care
Yes.
ICU.
Yes.
Yeah, especially when we were writing our recent commentary too. It was just every day we were kind of coming up with this other way. We're like, wow, it's so incredibly important for this disease, for this disease, for this disease. It really is a kind of overarching theme that I think has been really overlooked of how we're still kind of practicing medicine in a much more of a defensive posture instead of being really proactive. As you're saying, it's been a really exciting place to be. Particularly during my research times.
You would think that everyone that sees the data would feel the same way, but obviously the big pharma doesn't feel like that, right? And it's not all about doing the right thing for humanity. It's all about making
the
money.
bottom line.
And I was talking to a colleague at the Weitzman in Israel, and he's saying, Charlie, they're smart. Don't think that they're not smart.
Sure.
He says they're just greedy.
Yeah. I know. Well, yeah.
And but I was telling Megan today how acutely, what position we're in. It's nice to be on the cutting edge, but it's Megan, can't you get a grateful patient, make a donation? We need a donation so we can push the ball over, because that's what it's going to take. It's going to take these Bill Gates guys to open up and say, hey, we'll help you and move the peg forward. Because, what do I say, Bill? Okay. Because one of the unexpected findings, and you know what I'm going to say, Megan, is that the SPMs not just regulate the acute inflammatory response, but they help the acute inflammatory response clear bacteria and viruses. Clear bacteria and viruses. That was totally unanticipated. It's like, wow. Anti-inflammatory treatments do what? They immune suppress.
Right.
Okay. So sure, Humira is a great drug if you don't mind the risk of TB.
Right.
Anti-TNF therapy. Okay, fine. We didn't get enough money out of it for RA, so let's try it for IBD. TNF is such an important molecule for host defense. I don't want to sound too critical, but people are critical on me, I'm going to be critical back.
But it's absolutely true. They're not long-term solutions. They're not. This is why, our mortality numbers are getting worse and worse and worse in this country and around the world. We have to, as Megan says, start to engage in prevention. Start to the whole medical model absolutely has to undergo a paradigm shift. Peter Attia just wrote an awesome book that I'm tucked into, and he talks about medicine 2.0, which is what we're existing in, the paradigm we're existing in, and needing to move to medicine 3.0, which has active patient involvement, where there's, prevention is paramount, before there's any evidence of disease, or the evidence is, strictly at the molecular level.
Where it's undetectable. People are talking about biomarkers. Okay, well, something's already going on. Why don't we be figuring out what's the best for normal health? We don't know that what the metabolism picture should look like. We only have some ranges. Artemis's book just came out.
Oh, good. All right, I'll have to get it.
On the ideal diet and she explains it very nicely.
Good. Yeah, I'm sure she does. Yeah, she's brilliant. I have one more. I just have a question I know I'm going to get from listeners, so I want to just ask it to you. It's a little bit of a left turn, but some of these larger EPA DHA studies have shown in a vulnerable sort of older polypharmacy population the risk of AFib, and I don't think that you've seen AFib with SPMs, but just any thoughts on that? And
I don't have any thoughts on that. There's Alex Leaf, who has passed now. That was how he focused the use. He was the chair of medicine at Mass General, and he was an early advocate for increasing EPA and DHA and getting the American Heart Association to change their recommendations, because he was a strong believer. I had a chance to meet Alex on a number of occasions, and he was around even to see the early works on the resolvents, and I know he thought it was cool. But he and his group over the years published that EPA and DHA are actually ion channel regulators. So I think in his frame of mind that they would diminish the risk of atrial fibrillation, but I really don't know.
Yeah, I think that's right. But they have shown in a very small, like a minority subgroup, polypharmacy older individuals, that there may be, there was at least a trends and some significant, they did hit some significance, but still very low risk and in an isolated population. Anyway, I just, for the folks who are going to ping me and ask me about it.
Well, I can tell you one thing we found with the group that's now in Florida, just quickly, but again, it's an animal model, but still it was ahead of its time. And Ganesh is a cardiovascular researcher and physiologist, and we found in his heart models, ischemic injury models, that the spleen sends out white blood cells. So why the spleen? Okay, spleen is a lymphoid organ in the mouse, but in humans, it's the lymphoid organs. Send out monocytes that carry reparative monocytes that carry resolvents up to the heart and starts repair and restoration. And I think we're going to see a little bit more of that in the future.
Yeah, and the whole muscle regeneration, stem cell support, all of that. Maybe you'll get your dollars from Jeff Bezos and his new Altos labs, where they're all about. Well, actually, you're at Harvard, so David Sinclair and his
reversidrol.
Yes.
Well, there are
I'm telling you,
that say that
SPMs
they
fit in there
interact
somewhere.
with each other.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
Well, both of you, it was just a pleasure. Thank you for,
It was my pleasure to hear how knowledgeable you are on the field. It's really great. I know that you're delivering the best information.
Well, thank you.
Wow.
That's an honor. That's a real honor. Yeah, I mean, it's important information. I am a dedicated, committed, mouthpiece for the work that you're both doing. So thanks.
Thank you.
That's amazing.
Good luck.
Thank you so much.
As always, thank you for listening to New Frontiers in Functional Medicine, where, because of my sponsors, I am able to bring you the best minds in functional medicine. And of course, today is no exception. Not everybody can be a sponsor on my platform, so I appreciate the good work, the relentless research, and the generous support from my friends at Rupa Health, Biotics Research, and Integrative Therapeutics. These are brands I know and trust in my own clinic, and I can confidently recommend them to you. Visit them at rupahealth.com, bioticsresearch.com, and integrativepro.com. And please let them know that you learned about them on New Frontiers. And if it's not too much to ask, I would really appreciate a thumbs up or a kind review wherever you're listening to New Frontiers. Thanks.